Welcome to Your Family Dog, a podcast dedicated to helping families love living with dogs.
Hi, welcome back to Your Family Dog. I'm Julie Fudge Smith, and I'm here with the incomparable Tina Spring, who has just introduced a new curriculum, so be sure to check out Sit Happens, Tina's website. Lots of good stuff there, lots of good information, and check her out on Facebook as well. But that's not what we're talking about. It's worth noting, but not what we're going to talk about. What we want to talk about today is distractions. And specifically, I don't know about Tina. She's sitting there in like a halter top or a tank top. I have a t-shirt on and
fleece.
That's fleece. It's an athletic thing. But it's gorgeous weather here. And one of the things I was thinking about was the transition that can be really tough between doing your obedience either like in class or with your private trainer inside. How do we transition outside? How do I get my dog to be as well behaved in the driveway or in the yard or outside as he is inside in the kitchen? I want my dog to understand that sit does not necessarily mean in the kitchen facing mom while she gives me a treat. Sit means put my bottom on the ground, no matter where I'm at. But not just outside, but now's the time as we're coming out of our winter hibernation, we're going more places, and we're going more places with our dogs. We may be going to a friend's house for a barbecue, and they have a dog, so they say, bring your dog. How do I get my dog to behave in environments that are a lot more distracting than what we're used to? So I wanted to talk about distraction and specifically, how do we transition? How do we get our dogs outside to behave? How do we work around distractions? So with that, Tina, ta-da! It's your turn.
So now you're like, here, fix it. Okay. Yeah. So I start with blurring the line is what I've always called it. So I might do an exercise with the front door open with the dog on a leash. And we practice in the living room. We're going to slowly move closer to that open door and allow the dog to have greater access to outside. I also do a ton of being outside with high value food treats or toys and not really moving a whole bunch, doing a lot of stationary. We're sitting and we're just taking the world in together.
Yep.
I think so. A rule of thumb that I tell people, which I don't know how many people believe me, but it does make your life easier if you do it, is if you take your dog outside and you put a blanket down and you plop yourself down in the grass with your dog on a leash, how long does it take your dog to fall asleep in the sun? 10 minutes is probably a good spot to be in, right? That is a dog who can let the environment go enough after 10 minutes that they're like, ooh, you know what? I'm just going to cuddle my mom while she reads her book and we're going to hang out, or dad, and we're going to hang out in the grass. So that's usually where I tell people to start, is to just start with spending more time outside with your dog with high value reinforcers, rewarding them for checking in, noticing the things that they might have big feelings about, and helping them through that so that I know where to invest my time and energy to help the dog be able to be successful at the things I want them to be successful for. And notice I'm saying all of this is on leash to begin, even in the fenced yard, because I don't want to have to fix a dog charging the bunny through the fence. That's not the dog's already rewarded themselves by making the bunny run, right? So, or freeze. So instead, I want to do a lot of hanging out in a relatively predictable environment. So I also typically start sitting on a bench or at a table outside a grocery store or outside a home improvement store where the path of traffic is pretty predictable. Probably 1 in 5 people will try to say hello to my dog. I may or may not grant that permission, but I want the dog to learn how to reconcile that they don't have to be involved in every single thing that's going on around them. I find for most people that seems really foreign to them until I say, how many people did you make eye contact with the last time you went in the grocery store? And they're like, none.
Yeah, last time I was in the grocery store, this woman came up to compliment me on my hair for like the second or third time. Not the same trip. It's like she's seen me in the grocery store. And so you know what? It was unnerving. What?
Might be short-term memory loss.
Could be. It was a little unnerving. Anyway, I love those suggestions, and that's real similar to what I've done with clients as well. One of the things in Granville, in downtown Granville, there's each side of the street has very, very wide sidewalks. You'd see me doing this visual, like the fish was this big, right? With lots of benches, some of which are by busier parts than others. And one of the things that I would do in order to get dogs accustomed to just sort of being out and being around people in that way is we'd start at the non-busy end of the street. We'd sit on a bench where we got a couple of people walk by, maybe a dog or two, but not a whole lot. And then as we got accustomed and we'd look around, we get a treat, we check in with mom, we get a treat, a dog would go by, we'd get a couple more treats. And then as we got more accustomed to that, then we moved to slightly busier until the dog I felt was ready to go to what I would call the gauntlet, which was outside the ice cream parlor, and everyone in their family would go. So it's the whole thing is, I think one of the things about distractions you need to remember is that distractions need to be introduced slowly. And that can be in a couple different ways. One is it can be the gradual intensity of the distraction. So it could be that there are bunnies in your yard, and I love the idea of being with the door open, with a leash inside. Maybe that's how we start introducing our dogs to bunnies in the yard, is at a distance where we can see the bunny and not lose our brain, right? And then when we're good at seeing bunnies from the doorway, then maybe we can go onto the deck and look at bunnies or whatever the distraction may be, so that you can increase the level of distraction by increasing the intensity of the distraction slowly. And you can increase that intensity by either the number of distractions, like maybe there's a whole lot of bunnies, or by proximity. And so I think that one of the things to remember is that the slower you go, the faster you're going to achieve your goal.
Yeah. And adding movement of handler and dog adds significant complication. So I really do start with a ton of stationary work where things are moving kind of parallel to us. So, and I can also kind of streamline. So maybe my dog doesn't so much care about people and other dogs, but little kids are really exciting, right? Either they're a little bit scary, right, or they're just super exciting. Like we're over the moon about it. Dovey right now is very happy when he sees kids. Like he's so happy. So I can choose to hang outside of an area where there's going to be just predictably more children versus where I'm more likely to just see active older adults, or where like I can choose timing and location to work on whatever it is that I think my dog needs just a little bit more practice with. So the plaza where the store is, where I teach group classes, we have a Kroger, bless you. There are 3 benches out front. There's also 3 planters in a breezeway if we need shade, or if the dog struggles with wind, because it's not called a breezeway for nothing. So I can adjust the environment to a certain extent to help the dog be successful by time of day or location.
Right. I had a dog once that was very excited by bicycles. Bicycles, I mean, he was a super calm dog, except when it came to bicycles. So how did we introduce bicycles? Well, we started by working in downtown Granville because there were stationary bike racks. So people would stop to get some ice cream and put their bikes in the bike racks. So we started getting him accustomed to bicycles that weren't moving. So we'd spend time looking at bikes and sniffing bikes and, looking at the people that were getting off of the bikes. But this was all non-moving bicycles. And I thought it was important for him to become comfortable just with the object itself. And then what we started doing was we have a bike path, but there was a part of the bike path where we could get anywhere from being standing right next to the bike path to 50 feet away or more. And so when we started working with moving bicycles, we went during a time of the day when not everyone was out with their bikes, like in the middle of the day, if we could do it, because there'd be fewer bikes. And we started at a bigger distance, like 50 feet. We'd see a bike, we'd check in with mom or dad, we'd get a treat, and we slowly decreased the distance to the bike path, but we didn't up the number of bikes yet. Then when we went at a different time, when I knew there was going to be more bicyclists, boom, we were back to the bigger distance because the intensity of the distraction had increased. So the distance also had to increase. I couldn't go at the distance we could do with an occasional bike because it was just too much. So I think the idea of, learning how to read your dog and how to read the intensity or the level of distraction is really important. And if you take it slow and easy, we were able to get that dog to tolerate bicycles within just a few weeks, as opposed to sort of shoving him in and flooding him with bikes. It never would have worked.
Well, and part of this is it comes down to reading your dog's body language, right? We're always in such a hurry, myself included, that I sometimes leave my learner behind, right? So if I take Dovey out front here at the store and we sit out front on the benches, if he's watching everything that's going by with his back to me, he is in a very different place than if he's laid out flat in the sun with his eyes closed, kind of half listening to everything that goes by.
Right.
Or
if
I
he's
want to
sitting
build
and looking at you.
Right.
Is different.
I want to build on that relaxed, right? For me, some people like a dog that's overly jubilant. I find that he's kind of a clodhopper when he does that. So instead, I'm like, I really want him to mellow and settle. And that just takes time, right? Yeah. I could take my shoes off. I can work on, fixing my Birkenstock tan, and I can just hang out. And typically once you've done it a few times, the first time it might take an hour for your dog to settle out. The second time it's going to take 22 minutes. The third time it's going to take 7 minutes. The fourth time it's going to be like almost effortless. And I would say that that's true in a lot of the things we're working on. I will also say that the biggest resistance I see to this is that people worry that their dog's going to do something embarrassing. They are. They're going to do embarrassing things. And you know what? It's okay. You're going to occasionally be flatulent, and we forgive and love you anyway. So the model that I have been using that seems to be pretty effective is, so I'm going to give you some help on this. One is, imagine if a stranger had a dog that behaved like your dog and you were walking past, what information would you want, right? If the dog's a barker, I literally call out to the person who's walking our direction. He might bark at you. 9 times out of 10, the response is, yeah, mine does that too, right? With a big smile. So everybody just relaxes. It's not a big surprise. Then if the dog barks, I'm like, sorry. And if they don't, typically that other person is like, great job. He's not barking, right? Good job. Okay. Number 2, if your dog is barking at someone and it's making you uncomfortable. So I'm going to give an example that happened here at the store a couple of weeks ago. We were working with a puppy outside. A gentleman who was fascinating, kind of weirdly came up on a bike, holding an ice pack to his jaw. And it was disconcerting, right? He was just odd enough that there were some creepy vibes kind of going on. Well, he was on a bicycle. So when the puppy was barking, he was kind of making a grumpy face. And I said, "Oh, Siri, have you never seen a bicycle before? That's a silly bicycle," right? So I'm jollying the puppy, going, "No, no, no, it's not a problem." And that gentleman immediately went from being very tense, the dog is barking at me because I'm weird, to, and he was weird. He was weird, people. He was a little sketch, little sus. But very quickly, he was smiling and laughing with us because now it's, oh, wow, it's about the bike. It's not about the person, right? Or I will often say, as people are walking by, like, "That blouse is a beautiful color," or whatever. I'm going to engage the people in conversation, not anything super heavy, so that everyone breathes and relaxes. Because since COVID, I have seen a huge increase of people being really awkward with one another. So when we just smile and are friendly and say, "Hello, I love your child's backpack. Oh my gosh, your hair looks great today. That blouse is a very becoming color on you," whatever, it softens the whole thing instead of holding all that tension.
Right. Those are great suggestions. And I'm all about information giving in a quick and precise way. So, and there's lots of ways to give information that make it feel like you're not necessarily giving information. Like, I love "Oh, have you never seen a bicycle?" Because you're giving the dog information. You're also giving the person information without saying, "Hey, quit being a jerk. My dog's never seen a bike before." So I love
Well,
that.
and
And
in this
I used to
case,
do that too, saying, "Hey, if somebody's coming at you," you might say, "Hey, I'm going to move my dog to the other side because we're trying to learn how to walk past." I mean, just, one sentence or two or something that's going to, most people I find are just really cooperative. They want to help.
yeah.
They want your dog to be well behaved. And if you give them just a little bit of information, they're on board.
Well,
Absolutely.
and I would say another pointer is, if you're not like, okay, so let's say you're working with your dog on, I want to be able to go for a walk and stop and talk to Mildred across the street and not have my dog jump on Mildred because I don't want them to make her muddy or dirty or whatever. Instead of telling Mildred what to do, ask Mildred to hold on a second and manage your dog. So that does not mean a laser grip on their collar. It means loosen the leash, park the puppy or the dog so they can't jump, get them relaxed and focused on you while you're half talking to Mildred, and then say, "Okay, Mildred, we're ready." And now she can come by. And by parking, what I mean is you have the leash on your hand on one side, you run it under your foot, and you stand on the leash, giving the dog enough leash that they can comfortably sit, stand, lie down, but they can't jump on sweet Mildred.
Absolutely. That is,
Right.
yes.
So we're not punishing the dog. We're setting up some guardrails, because if we haven't had that dog outside visiting with people in 5 months or 10 months, depending on where you live, 8 months, then they're out of practice. So this is a really great way to practice.
Right. And it brings us back to one of the episodes we did, that management is training your dog. What you're doing there is you are effectively managing Sparky. And I usually tell people, if you put your hand at your waist where the leash hits the ground, that's where you put your foot. And that's probably going to be just about the right distance for Sparky to be able to stand, lay down, sit, without it being hard on his neck or choking. But
Right.
that's,
Like we're not
managing your
having
dog.
a tight leash. No tight
Right.
leashes.
No tight leashes, but managing your dog is training your dog. Because also, too, by managing your dog in a way that he's comfortable, he's going to buy into this a whole lot more than if you're making this situation scary, uncomfortable, maybe even painful. That your
Well,
dog
or just accidentally flooding the dog, right? Environments change without, I don't know. The other day I was outside and like 20,000 starlings flew over. right? And Dovey's
Wow.
brain turned to jujubes, right? It was a big, huge flock of starlings flying over, doing their migration. So in that moment, he couldn't really, I mean, he was trying to focus on me, but it was like the sky turned black. Like it kind of surprised him. So when he did finally check back in, I just had a big party with him. Like that was a lot, wasn't it? Like that was a lot of birds. And he was like, it was a lot. Right. So I think I don't want our dogs. I think it is an unreasonable expectation that they just stare at us the whole time. I think that's silly. They need to be
Right.
able to take in the environment and reconcile that not everything is their beeswax. Right. So
Right. I think it's really important for your dog to understand, hey, I check in with mom. You know, I look at the world, look around, things are happening. What do you think, mom? The dog checks in with me. We get a treat. I don't insist that you stand there and stare at me because I don't particularly want to stand there and stare at you. I might want to check out the world too. But what I want is my dog to feel comfortable enough to look around and then check back with me to make sure that we're all cool, right? This is cool. Everything's fine. And that's it exactly. Because the other thing is the world is going to happen. And if my dog doesn't know how to handle the world as it happens, or it can't recognize it because most of the time he's just sitting there staring at me, then the world's going to catch him off guard. It's going to make him uncomfortable. And I certainly don't want that.
right, because I want my dog to understand that we're a team, right? The same that I want my
Yes.
child to understand we're a team. And I'm not asking my dog to solve adult human situations any more than I'm asking my child to handle adult situations. If my child is worried about someone coming up who looks a little scary to them, I'm going to support them in that because I want them to learn to discern what's safe and what's not safe, what doesn't feel safe, and to not poo-poo that. To be like,
Right.
no, if it doesn't feel safe, here's how we handle it. Right. So
Right.
I can remember taking my daughter to her first concert and saying, if ever, even if you're an adult, if ever you're at a venue and someone is creeping you out, here's a great way to handle it. Like approach a group of people who look friendly and nice, go into the group as if you belong there, walk up and be super friendly, like, hey, how are you guys? And then to one of the men or one of the moms, say, hey, this is what's going on. And I'm just using you guys to kind of camouflage me that I'm not alone because this person's been following me or sketching me out or whatever. The vast majority of moms, the vast majority of dads, of humans are going to give you safe passage, right? They are going to have your back. So it's a wonderful way to manage the situation when you're, especially if you're alone, right? Or even if she was with one of her girlfriends, like she was at an age where she was much more independent and doing things on her own. And I wanted to teach her easy ways to solve a situation that was scary. And she's actually used that and taught it to her kids when sketchy stuff happens, right? What do you do if you're driving your car and somebody is following you and that's creeping you out? Like, where do you go? What do you do? So we talked through all those things. I think for whatever reason, we forget that our dogs also sometimes need us to guide them through what do we do when we're uncomfortable. And especially adolescent dogs, which is usually what I'm working with, they do distance increasing signals that often they're closing the distance to exactly the thing that they want to have move away from them, right? They're giving a signal that says, you are too close. I want that thing to move away from me. But they're closing the distance because it's never occurred to them that they could move away. So I'm just encouraging them and teaching them like, okay, yes, that's very exciting or that's very worrisome. Let's move away from that and solve our problem a different way. I'm here to help.
Yeah. Right. I've done something very similar. I've also told people like, there are sometimes where it's difficult to move away. that you may be in an environment where you can't increase. And I talk about in distance increasing all the time, that's a great way to diffuse a situation. And sometimes it's as little as moving your dog from the left side to the right. Sometimes even just that is enough, because now you are also providing a little bit of a visual barrier as well as a little bit more distance. Sometimes it's not a lot that's needed, but just enough to get your dog to feel like, okay, that's enough distance away from somebody. But the other thing I've told people is I said, you have my permission to be your dog's best advocate. So that if you're in a situation where you can't give enough distance, you have my permission to step between you and whatever person is coming at your dog and say, I'm sorry, he's not feeling very social today, or whatever. But sometimes it's funny because people, I think they want, they want to be nice. They want their dog to be nice. Somebody's coming at them and it makes them uncomfortable and they're not sure what to do. I think sometimes they just need permission to do what their gut says, which is step between this person and my dog. Or even say something like, somebody says, can I pet your dog? My answer is always, well, it's fine with me, but you have to ask Zuzu. And usually by this point, Zuzu's in their lap. But with Bingley, he was a little bit more resident. And so I'd say, well, fine, you have to ask Bingley. And they'd look at me and say, well, just, put your hand down. So he comes over and sniffs you. You can pet him under the chin, right? And if Bingley did not move forward to greet them, I would not allow them to move forward to greet him. But instead, what I would say is, I'm sorry, apparently we are not feeling very social today. Let's try another time.
Right. Try not to take it personally. So a couple of extra pointers on this. If you have a puppy who you have hyper socialized to the point that now they're screaming if they don't get to say hello to the person or the dog, you have a lot of work to do not allowing them to greet, because you have to dig out of that hole. And so I have a puppy coming in for a positive reinforcement based board and train for a week. We are going to spend a week doing exactly this lesson of, you are the cutest Cavalier King Charles Spaniel in the world.
Oh, they are.
And not everyone wants you in their mouth. Because he is convinced that the world will come to an end if he doesn't get to say hello to everyone every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. And with Zuzu is very sweet. You know that Zuzu wants to talk to you because she comes up. I used to tell people, we don't actually go through a walk. We go through a lean. So when we're out for a walk, like in Granville, she'll meet somebody, she just leans up next to them. And I usually have to, and most people are really cool. They usually really want her to. But there are times I'm like, Zuzu, sweetheart, we can't lean on everyone. That's not fair to them. And it's probably not fair to you either, because, you're leaning against somebody who's uncomfortable with dogs. It may not be as pleasant as you would like it to be. But I wanted to get back to a little bit about specific things. Like, for example, one of the things that I think is just an incredibly important thing is to teach your dog to sit, and to sit anywhere you ask them to. So one of the things is how do I transition? Like, my dog will sit anywhere inside anytime. How do I get him to sit outside? I think it goes back to exactly what we were talking about earlier, which is start slowly. Start with, like with people, I usually say, okay, what's the least distracting part of your house outside? Maybe it's the garage. Back one of the cars out of the garage and practice sit in the garage. That's a new environment, but there's not a lot of external busyness going on. So start in the garage, and then in the garage, first with the door closed, then with the door open, but always on leash. Or because sometimes it's your backyard that is crazy busy because it backs up to a forest and there's all these temptations. Sometimes it's your front yard because you're right on the bus route and all the kids walk by your house. So find out what part outside is the least distracting for your dog and practice sit on a leash. And the other thing is you mentioned something earlier that I think bears reiterating, and that is the level of the distraction is increasing, the value of the treats needs to also increase. I think that if you're working in an extraordinarily tough environment that's highly, highly distracting, and it's hard for your dog to do that. It's not that they don't want to. I sometimes think people are always really stubborn. And I'm like, I'm not sure that he doesn't want to. I don't think he can. I think he's so overwhelmed, he can't listen and do what you're asking him to do. So you have to make it worth their while to relax and listen to you. So make sure that the value of the treat corresponds to the level of distraction.
Well, right. So if you think about how, if you or I were taken to a completely novel environment that had a lot of things that would be interesting to us, how long would it take us to take in that data completely unprompted and then look to our partner? It would take a hot minute, right? And for our dogs, often it's all the smells, which we're totally like missing.
Yeah.
So I want to eat the elephant one bite at a time. And I want to celebrate that my dog is interested in things. A dog who's walking around sniffing is a good thing, right?
Yes.
They're relaxing and they're taking in data in a world that we don't really even have a look in. And so I honor that. Now, let's say I'm like, okay, if you say to me, okay, well, dog trainer, I want to be able to take the dog for a walk though, then I would tell you start working in an empty parking lot.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, another good place is if there's an outdoor tennis court that's enclosed. Because one of the things you can do is you can work on your loose lead walking by not even having your dog on a leash. You know, you can walk around the tennis court or this enclosed environment, and every time the dog's by your side, you reward. And
As
so the
long
dog's
as it's
learning
dry.
I'm sorry, what?
As long as the tennis court or the pool deck is dry. If
Right.
it's wet, you run the risk of removing very, very swiftly your dog's toe pads, and it's excruciating. So just make sure that those surfaces are dry when you're working on them and not too warm. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
like being able to go to the park and go off to the edge of the park and sit on a blanket in the shade and watch everybody at the park is like PhD level work for our dogs that lots of people don't ever do, because when they
Right.
take their dogs, the point is to go somewhere to do something. And I'm like, just hold and wait. Suzanne Clothier has a whole wonderful discussion about this. You gather so much information from your dog. And I personally think a dog gains an appreciation for you for thanks for noticing that this thing is more difficult for me, or this thing is exciting for me, or whatever, so that their arousal can come down and you just believe them.
Right. But you know, part of it is just by parking on a bench or parking in the shade on a blanket and just spending time with your dog, watching them, feeding them when, oh gosh, you're right, that kid went by in the scooter. That's pretty exciting. And you turned and checked in with me. Yay. You're building a relationship with your dog. And the better your relationship with your dog, the more comfortable your dog's going to be when you're out and about together, because they're going to be able to trust you more. It's all about cooperation and trust. And I think that we don't spend enough time just sort of building that relationship, building the cooperation, the trust, and the understanding of one another.
Yes. And I'm not sure that we're good at teaching our dogs the beauty of doing nothing.
Oh, I would agree with you there.
Right? That we can just sit in the sun and watch the world go by.
Oh, Clementine is very good at that. If she's not being a naughty dog, she's really good at the chilling out thing.
But you'll laugh. It reduces barking. It reduces leash pulling. It improves cooperation between you and your dog. Like it's a big deal. And it's so like most things that are powerful, it is simple and profound and not difficult. Right? If you've chosen the spot well, that your dog isn't over threshold, you're doing great. And by the way, if your dog is fearful, this is exactly the same lesson.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do the same thing with fear. And that's one of the things we would do. I would do with shy or fearful dogs with the whole bench thing in Grandma. We'd start way over on the side of town where, you get one person, one dog come by and the bench is pretty far away from everybody. And we may do that for, several days as we begin to develop just the comfort of being outside. For some dogs, just it's not even the visuals, it's the smells and it's the sounds that are just really terrifying. And so what you need to do is remember that sometimes I don't think we know exactly what we're counter conditioning. So we think it might be the sight of something, but it could be that it's actually the sound of something. So it's really a good idea to pay attention to what does your dog respond to? If a car comes, by and honks a horn and your dog leaps up, well, that's good information. So I think we need to be aware of the fact that they are viewing the world far differently than we are. And what may be a trigger for them might be something that we have to spend some time just taking a look at.
So even if I take my dog, so I don't take my dogs to people's homes. I don't do that. But if I was going to, we would start everything exactly the same way. We're on a leash. You're with me. I'm reinforcing you for chilling out and relaxing with me. And it might be the second or the third visit. I will avoid the peer pressure before I'm like, okay, now he can play.
Right. Right. Because, you just want to make sure that everybody's comfortable. Their dogs, your dogs, you, them, everybody's got to feel like this is an okay thing for me to be happening. So if you were to give 3 steps for somebody to follow to introduce a new behavior, introduce an old behavior in a new environment, what would be the 3 things you would want to be sure that they take a look at?
Well, I would tell them to pack their patience hat and high value treats. And I would have the dog in the environment, and I would not cue or ask for a behavior until the dog has volunteered it on his or her own in that environment. So an example would be, I'm not going to ask for a down until Dovey, all on his own, has chosen to lie down in the environment.
Okay.
Like in that exposure. What about you?
Well, I think all of those things are great. I think I would also say high value treats. I would say pay attention to your dog's body language. And the third thing is keep it short and sweet. This is not an hour-long exercise. Perhaps what you want to do is introduce the new environment for 5 to 10 minutes, or maybe 20 minutes if they're really coming down. But if your dog is completely terrified by it, then get out. Because I think that people also think, I can't do this. I can't just take an hour and go sit under a tree with my dog. You don't have to take an hour, Be careful of the time that you spend, because there could be some time that
Right. 5 minutes is a great start.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a great start.
Absolutely. You go, you look around, we have a few treats, you see them start to relax, give them a few more treats, good dog, head home. Next time you go to the same place, maybe you're spending 7 minutes, the dog's relaxing sooner, you're rewarding the relaxation, they offer a sit, good dog, have a treat, go on home. You can do this in short and sweet increments.
And it might just be going out your front or your side door.
Yeah.
Right. My dogs go out the back door all the time. They're super fluent with that. But going out the garage door, going out the front door is a little bit different. So those transitions, wherever my dog says something changed. So let's say my dog is beautiful about sitting and letting me leash up and he's totally relaxed. But the moment the door is open, his brain turns to marmalade and he cannot focus. Well, then that's where I need to work before I can go on a walk, or I am starting the walk with mayhem and foolishness that is not likely to improve.
Very good point. Very good point. Okay. So I'm going to make sure that in the show notes, I do a link to our podcast on management is training your dog. And do you have a Susan Clothier book that I could put on the website that would be something most people would be interested in taking a look at? Bones Would Rain from the Sky
I
is
think
a good introduction.
Bones Could Rain from a Sky is a good one. I actually have a video that I often show people about the beauty of doing nothing. So I'll send you that link.
Okay. And the video link.
She's one of my favorite trainers.
Yeah,
like she really does some phenomenal work.
The other thing is I was also going to link to is your puppy training, because there's some really good stuff in your puppy training videos on teaching settling and teaching your dog to just chill in an environment. So you want to give a little plug for your puppy program there?
Sure. I mean, I have an online puppy and dog raising program called 90 Days to the Perfect Puppy. It is geared to young dogs, though I even have adult clients who have used it where, for example, they got a dog that maybe grew up in the shelter and is now a year old and isn't necessarily crate trained and house trained and leash trained and all those things. And the goal of the program is for us to do it together and to teach a family how to incorporate training their dog with living with their puppy or dog, so that you're seeing all of these opportunities to reinforce behavior and to mold behavior immediately and not let it get to the dog's been doing this for a year and now it's a bigger issue to try to fix.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's great. I have all those things written down so that when I get it back from our engineer, I can create a well-informed or an informative podcast. So that's great. So just remember that when you want to move your training from inside to outside, or you want to move it to a new environment, slow and steady will win that race. Pay attention to your dog's behavior. Increase the value of your rewards. Keep your training short and sweet. And wear your patience hat. That's a really good one, Tina. Something I need to remind myself of. Instill a little bit more patience. And I think you'll find it to be successful. As usual, if you like the show, please give us a thumbs up or a 5-star rating on wherever it is that you get your podcasts. If you have any questions or concern, please reach out. If you have a guest you'd like us to see, we'd also like to hear that. You can reach us at yourfamilydogpodcast@icloud.com. That's yourfamilydogpodcast@icloud.com. And I don't know if I mentioned in the last...
Do we have any guest interviews coming up that we can tease?
We do. Dr. Silber is going to come. I haven't gotten the booking link from him yet, but he's going to come and talk to us about mushrooms for dogs, mushroom therapy. All right. Well, that's great. And we'll see you all next time on Your Family Dog.
Thanks for listening to Your Family Dog. Got questions? Interesting ideas? Visit www.yourfamilydogpodcast.com to share your thoughts.